Hello. Well, if you were ever to have a celebrity in the world of defence, then our guest today certainly fits the bill. General John W Nicholson, better known as Mick, was the commander of all US forces and the 41-nation NATO-led coalition in Afghanistan from 2016 to 2018. Before that, he commanded NATO's Allied Land Command and was commanding general of the 82nd Airborne Division. In earlier years as an infantry officer, he lived in Europe and the Middle East, forging close relationships with security leaders across those regions. Recognised as a great mentor, no wonder then that he was welcomed to industry and for our region. And it was with delight that in December last year we learned that Mick had been appointed Chief Executive for Lockheed Martin in the Middle East. And he's got responsibility covering Lockheed's strategy, operations and growth in the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq and Pakistan. And he's joining us on the line now from his regional headquarters in Abu Dhabi. General Nicholson, Mick, welcome to the programme. Well, let me start by asking you about the journey that brought you to the UAE. In the context of that illustrious military career that I just talked about, what is it that's drawn you back to the region?
Well, thanks, Alan, for the opportunity to join you today. It's a pleasure to be with you and to talk about that. As you know, I spent 36 years in the military. Much of that time was here in Europe and the Middle East and South Asia. The latter part of my career, the majority of my time was spent in coalitions that involved many of the nations of the region, all of our NATO allies, and especially the Emiratis. And so, as you know, the Emiratis have fought alongside Americans in many conflicts going all the way back to Desert Storm. They've been a key partner of ours in combating extremism throughout the region. And I have an enormous amount of respect and gratitude to the Emirati Armed Forces and to all of our allies and partners throughout the region. So for me as a soldier, transitioning to the private sector and to the business arena, this was a perfect place to come and serve, again, to work with the people who I served with in uniform.
Now, we've talked on this programme before about connected battlefield, collaboration between nations and interoperability. Now, I guess that with your Afghanistan experience in particular, you really understand those challenges. But how do you see that playing out for Lockheed Martin?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. The coalition in Afghanistan was 41 nations. It was built around a nucleus of NATO nations. So most of our NATO allies at some point in the campaign were there. And I served in Afghanistan for over 6 years in the course of that war. So I had an opportunity to work with many of our allies. But you're right, each nation brings a unique strength to the coalition. So the art of this is how to get that comparative advantage, that strength of each nation, so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And so I, as a soldier, as a leader, really enjoyed that, getting to know each nation, their national culture, their military culture. What is it that they uniquely brought to the mix that could help us? And if you can do that, if you can figure that out and bring it all together, then again, the coalition brings enormous capability and enormous legitimacy. Now, to transition that over to Lockheed, we sell products to over 100 nations around the world. And so there is, when people join that Lockheed family, that's what they're doing. They're getting the benefit of interoperability with other countries. This provides options, when short of war. So as a soldier, I would say, most service members who've seen combat want to avoid war. So if there's ways we can deter it or prevent it and give our political leaders options that prevent a war, that's what we want to do. And so interoperability with allies, with coalition partners is one of the ways that we do that. And that's one of the things that we do at Lockheed.
Now, you started as Chief Executive for Lockheed Martin back in December, and certainly the Middle East has been interesting in terms of global events. What's your assessment of the security dynamics in the Middle East and beyond?
Sure. Well, the week I arrived in Abu Dhabi was the week of the first missile attack that they received from Yemen, from the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Of course, those ballistic missiles, they didn't build them in Yemen. They were provided by someone else. So what you see here is a proliferation of some dangerous technologies, ballistic missiles, drones, other technologies. You see adaptive enemies. We still see extremism as an issue in the region. And indeed, for the last 20 years, we have partnered with the Emirates and other nations in the region to combat extremism. But now, of course, that's changing. And we see from a US perspective, great power competition is the phrase we use, but our interests are being challenged globally. China, Russia, obviously the situation in Ukraine, and this. So we are entering a new period, even as we need to keep an eye on and take measures to combat extremism. So that's very important. On the positive side of the ledger, with the Abraham Accords, we've seen this has opened up new relationships in the region. So with Israel and the Emirates taking the lead there with a very courageous and visionary decision by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, the president of the Emirates, to engage in that. With Bahrain, Morocco, and other nations. So there's a changing dynamic there. Yes, there's still concern about issues with Iran, and we know that there's a lot of activity going on diplomatically. I don't want to get into the politics of that too much. Obviously, anything short of war is great, but at the same time, nations have to be ready. You know, one of the ways to prevent conflict is to be strong, is to be a hard target, to have capabilities that would give a potential adversary pause before they would attack you. It was very encouraging to see that some of the products that Lockheed has provided to our host nation here, to the Emirates, were very useful in defeating those attacks that were launched against the country in January. And we noted that the adversary stopped after 3 attempts, and having those ballistic missiles defeated, they stopped shooting them. That doesn't mean they're not out there right now thinking about ways to attack, and that's where we want to help our partners with that. I think, so yes, it's a complex landscape, not all negative, also positive, but it's one that we need to be in front of challenges. We need to adapt and deal with those challenges, and that's what we're trying very hard to do at Lockheed.
Okay, looking at the business environment for Lockheed Martin, what's the competitive landscape like? And what does Lockheed Martin have to do to remain a partner of choice to Gulf nations? Well,
that is what we would like to be, the partner of choice. And Lockheed Martin's been here for almost 50 years. If you look at right here in the Emirates, at some of the key systems that we provided, the F-16 Block 60, the THAAD missile, the Patriot, the PAC-3 MSC missile, the Black Hawk helicopter in an armed variant, the HIMARS rocket system. These systems have helped to be foundational systems in the Air Force and in the other services here. So we want to be that partner, and not just for the sale, but to continue to stay. And as these systems evolve, as technologies evolve, we do upgrades to them. So that's our goal, is to be a steadfast and reliable partner to the nations in the region, and especially here in the Emirates. This means, for example, the F-16, we have F-16s in Jordan, Iraq, Bahrain, Oman, as well as the UAE, Pakistan. So the missile systems that are doing so well that we see in Ukraine today, the HIMARS rocket, the Javelin, these are Lockheed systems. These are other systems that are very popular with our friends here. I'd say also Lockheed is very focused on the future. When nations purchase Lockheed systems, it's not just the system they're gaining. They then, as I said, become a part of this larger family of 100 nations that have our systems, and the continual development that occurs.
It's something that really interests me is the way social responsibility works and the way you get communities together. How do you see that future then working for Lockheed Martin in the Middle East?
Well, thanks, Alan. The nations in the region, and here in the Emirates especially, are very interested in the future generation. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed speaks about what will happen when the last barrel of oil is sold, and this shows a leader who's very visionary and thinking of the future. This leads to an investment in local industrial participation and development of human capital. And this is an area where Lockheed really wants to contribute to the future here in the Emirates and elsewhere. So, for example, what can be produced in country? What can be serviced and maintained in country? What investments can we make in the human capital of the Emirates going forward? For example, we run an internship program. We've had about 100 interns graduate from that program, where they study robotics, AI, advanced engineering technologies. They do this internship for about 3 months at our CISS, our Center for Innovation and Security sector. Some of those interns actually go on to be employees of Lockheed. And so we're looking to invest heavily in the human capital development and in the opportunities for industrial participation. So as we look to the future, yes, we want to provide cutting edge technology and great systems, but we also want to make sure that that next generation of Emiratis is prepared for future challenges by investing in them and by investing in Emirati businesses going forward.
Mick, it's been an immense pleasure having you on the program. Thank you for joining us today, and wish you all the very best with a job in the Middle East. And we look forward to seeing you around the circuit at some time.
Likewise, Alan, thank you so much for this opportunity. I look forward to working with you again in the future.